Women Voters. Please welcome Betty.
Thanks, Jeff, and I am happy to be here. This is one of my favorite volunteer activities. So whether you are here in person or watching virtually through the Chamber or Argus Leaders live streams, we welcome you to the final legislative coffee of 2022. And as Jeff mentioned, I am here today representing the League of Women Voters. We do have the honor today of having legislators with us from Districts 10, 12, 16, and 25. I'm going to kind of review your options for submitting questions. If you have access to an email account on your phone or other electronics, you can send your questions to Sioux Falls lwv@gmail.com. And I think this is still up on the slides here in the room. If you put coffee on the subject line, that will help us out. We have some volunteers that are monitoring that, and we'll copy those questions onto cards and get them brought down to me. If you are here in person and prefer writing your own questions, there is a table set up at the top with a packet of cards. You can write down your questions and submit those. We are not going to be picking questions up from the audience. You will need to take them up, and they'll get them logged in and sorted and brought down to me. Regardless of what measure you use, it is really important if you can include the bill number and address issues that are occurring at the state level, not at the federal or local level, and address your questions so that they can be responded to by all legislators. We will not ask questions that are directed to an individual legislator. One of the challenges that as moderator we do have is oftentimes we get multiple questions on the same topic. And so typically we kind of look through those and then ask a general question. We've had some comments about that the last couple of weeks, and so I'm going to try to do a little better job of maybe trying to find one representative question on a topic and ask it as written versus paraphrase that. So we'll see how that goes today. So if your question does not get asked, you could stay after the event and speak with legislators individually and still ask that you respect social distancing or contact your legislators through emails or phone calls is another option. I am going to ask that you silence your cell phones at this point in time. If you are so inclined to have a conversation, please take that out into the hallway. The other aspect of our format is this is really intended to be a neutral format, and so just know that if there is applause or cheering, I will shut that down. That helps us to keep things moving along and get as many questions addressed as we can. So with that, I want to kind of run through the format. We're going to give each of our legislators that are here today a chance to introduce themselves, indicate what district they represent, what committees they serve on, and how long they have served in the legislature. We will then move on to our questions. Each legislator will have 90 seconds to respond to questions. There is no rebuttal time. If you want to respond to a question, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you when it is your turn. If I miss you, you can raise it a little higher or speak out, and I'll try to catch you. So when we get to the end of the coffee today, we will then have an opportunity for each legislator to provide a 90-second closing statement to comment further on issues that have been brought up, or they can comment on topics that have not been covered in the questions that they've asked today. So legislators, we have a timer with us this morning right here, and she will let us know when we have 30 seconds left. I appreciate it when you follow the time limits, and then I will give you a verbal cue as well if you run over. So with that, we are going to get started with introductions, and they are going to begin on my far left.
State Senator Jim Bolin. I represent District 16, which is all of Lincoln County south of Harrisburg, and then all of Union County all the way down to Dakota Dunes. A little different. I don't represent any part of the city of Sioux Falls. I've been in the legislature for 14 years. I served 8 years in the House. I've now served 6 years in the Senate. I serve on Health and Human Services, Education, Local Government, and then I'm also the chairman of the Retirement Law Committee. I'm glad to be here, and I live in Canton, and everybody in Canton's really happy because we won the state wrestling tournament last night. Thank you.
Good morning, Steve Helgard, District 10, that's Northeast Sioux Falls, Brandon and Renner area. I've served in the legislature. This is my 8th year now. Served on probably half the committees, held about half of the leadership positions, and this year I'm serving on appropriations, so digging deeper into the budget. I started that actually reviewing the budget when I was in my first year, and I was pleased to be able to be on the committee this year, so that's where I'm at.
Senator Maggie Sutton, also in District 10. I live in the very east part of Sioux Falls. I serve on the Joint and Senate Appropriations. In previous years, I've served in the Military and Veterans Affairs along with an interim of Rules and Review Committee. This is my 4th year. Glad to be here.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is John Hanson. Thanks so much for being here this morning. I'm from Del Rapids, and I represent District 25, which is right now northern and eastern Minnehaha County. I've been in the legislature for, this is my 7th year in the legislature. I'm currently the Speaker Pro Tem of the House. I'm also the Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and I serve on the State Affairs Committee. Also serve on Legislative Procedure, and in the interim I serve on Rules Review, and I chair that committee as well. So thanks again for having us, and it's good to be with you this morning.
Good morning. My name is Greg Jameson. I'm with District 12 in the House of Representatives. This is my 4th year, my 2nd term, just not consecutive. And I serve on the Taxation Committee in the House, along with Local Government. And District 12 is in the southwest part of Sioux Falls, and thank you for being here today.
Hi, my name is Representative Tom Pischke. I serve in, this one. Hi, my name is Representative Tom Pischke. I serve District 25. District 25 is the northern half of Minnehaha County. I live in Del Rapids, and but the district includes Colton, Del Rapids, Baltic, Garrettson, Valley Springs, and then a little bit of the east side of Sioux Falls right now. I serve as the Vice Chair of the House Taxation Committee, and then I'm also on the Judiciary Committee. And yeah, that's all I got for right now.
All right, thank you. So with that, we are going to move on to questions. And our first question is on voter registration, Senate Bill 69. The question that we have before us is, will you join the Secretary of State on supporting allowing online updates to voter registration? Senate Bill 69. Representative Hanson.
Well, thanks for the question. I won't be supporting that bill. I think it's really important to have election integrity and security in not just South Dakota but across the country. And you know, we just went through an election where there were a lot of concerns raised about the security and integrity of the election. And so when it comes to making sure that our process is secure, one thing that I want to make sure of is that there's a paper trail that's auditable all throughout the way. And so I know that it's really convenient to just go on your computer and click a few buttons and register to vote, or to go on your computer and vote. But I don't think we should go down that road in South Dakota. I've done recounts before. I've been involved with a number of recounts, actually. And if there's one thing that's really important, it's having those paper ballots. And it's having that paper trail. And so I think for South Dakota, frankly, I think for the country, but in our state, we need to make sure that every transaction, when it comes to the vote, that there is a paper trail, that it's not done electronically, so that we can know if we have to go back and look that there was no fraud and that we can trust our elections.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Anyone else? Senator Sutton.
This bill was in the Senate, passed 20 yeas to 15 nays. I did vote against this bill. Minnehaha grew 27,000. Lincoln County grew by 20,000. And so with that, we really need to look and make sure the integrity of our elections is accurate. And I just felt that this bill did not go in that direction.
Representative Howgard.
Yes, thank you. Likewise, I'm concerned about the integrity of those registrations. I also did an audit of one of the election races last election cycle, and found that the person that I was assisting had actually won the election, but she chose not to challenge it in court, just for a variety of reasons. But it just demonstrates that there needs to be that kind of integrity in the process. This particular bill would provide for an opportunity for anyone who has access to a computer and that basic information to make changes in the voter's identification, or partially in the identification, and also in the address and all that sort of thing. So I think it's got some issues, and it's an extremely important event to vote for your elected representatives, and this should be part of it. You should be able to confirm that through personal contact at the county offices.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Jameson.
Nothing like being the odd guy out. I haven't seen this bill yet. Of course, it's just been through the Senate. But just previewing it just right now, I mean, the idea of making electronic updates to your voter registration, there seems to be plenty of safeguards in here that make it okay. We need to do as much as we can to, individuals who are handicapped or impaired in some fashion, who are unable to vote like most of us are privileged to vote, or just changes that need to be made. Anything that we can generally do to help people vote just makes sense. You can't go too far, obviously. Having somebody show up without an ID and still intend to vote doesn't make sense. But to make some tweaks here so far, based on what I can read, seems pretty reasonable and pretty good safeguards. So we'll see.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to the next question then. This is in regard to Senate Bill 20. In 2020, the voters of South Dakota passed Initiated Measure 26 and approved medical cannabis. Since then, the South Dakota Medical Cannabis Program has not provided one cannabis patient the relief voted for in the measure. Multiple local news agencies report arrests, confiscations of cards, and cannabis from patients, leaving the only dispensary option for medical cannabis in the state. Numerous bills are currently being circulated that weaken Initiated Measure 26. Senate Bill 20 is one of those because it removes legal protections for legitimate need medical cannabis users, while the legislature stands up a working medical cannabis program. Could you share with us your position on Senate Bill 21, weakening the rights of medical cannabis users?
Senate Bill 20, you want, right?
Yeah. Sorry, Senate Bill 20.
I'll go
Representative
first.
Pischke.
Well, thank you for the question. This bill actually basically just died yesterday on the House floor. There was a reconsideration motion that was made, and the motion did not get the required votes for the bill to stay alive. There's been, like the question asked, there's been a number of bills this year that are basically messing with IM26. And me personally, I've been against a good number of them. I mean, probably the majority of them. The problem we have right now is that a lot of the providers in the state of South Dakota are not issuing your prescription or allowing for people to go down the path of having a medical marijuana card. I believe we heard in committee that there's only 211 cards already given out by the state so far. And so in my estimation, we need to give this program more time to get up and running before the legislature is making all these changes. So That's why I've been basically opposed to pretty much every bill that's come forward in that regard. The people have voted for this by a wide margin. 70% of the voters voted for item 26. And I'm trying to do my best to respect the will of the voters in this regards. And so that's why I've been opposed to all those measures, and especially Senate Bill 20.
Representative Jameson.
Thank you. I was wondering how long it would take for marijuana to come up as a topic. And I was surprised, actually, it wasn't the first one. Okay, right. So for us in the legislature, it has been just a dominating topic. And, as the former speaker mentioned, there's an attempt to uphold what IM 26 intended to have happen. But there's also an attempt by the legislature and it's both bodies really and the governor to try to make it as strong and protect individuals, safeguards. Once it becomes law, all of a sudden the microscope really comes out and we start to try to figure out, well, where are the flaws? Where are the fixes? And everybody's got ideas and approaches to it, and they're all intended to make it better. There's really not an attempt to just circumvent the voters and crush their will or intent. It's really a wholehearted approach to try to make it better and safer. I believe that. I've been working with Representative Pischke as well to uphold IM 26 as best as we can. But at the end of the day, there's still some tweaks that need to be made, and some changes have been good. Others have been a stronger approach, almost too much. But just know that the body is trying to make it a good program.
Thank you. Representative Haugard.
Well, thank you very much for the question. This whole thing's developing, and I suspect probably every year for the next 10 plus years we'll see tweaks to all these, and I shouldn't even use that word, I suppose. We'll see modifications to the initiated measure, and that's what Senate Bill 20 is even. What that's doing is that's taking the initiated measure and striking through about a page of the language of the initiated measure and inserting something else. So the problem is there are unintended consequences all throughout this system. Just because it was an initiated measure, it wasn't like a comprehensive plan to lay this out and actually get it well established. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is Senate Bill 20 strikes through a lot of initiated measure and replaces it with other language. No, I don't support 20 right now.
No questions from the audience. They need to be submitted in writing and brought down. Senator Sutton.
I did vote for this bill. Medical cannabis did pass, and we are dealing with it in the legislature. And so as a result of that, as a legislative body, we need to make the best decisions to make sure that the citizens of South Dakota know the rules and regulations. When this bill got passed, there was nothing on the books. There was an interim study in the summer. There have been a lot of legislators who have put a lot of work into this medical cannabis to make it work. So what this is just saying, hey, you need a medical card. You need to be a medical card holder. That's what this bill is saying. And so we have seen lots of these bills. So it's making the right decision to make sure it's regulated correctly.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. So, if I'll just rewind back real quick, like I was saying earlier, we have rules come through Rules Review Committee, and that's a committee that I chaired this interim. And we had like 126 pages of rules regarding the medical marijuana program that I supported because it was our job to implement that law. And there have been measures that have come before the legislature this year. And one of the things that I look at in particular when these measures come before me is, okay, is this reasonable as it relates to a medical program, or does this have something more to do with de facto legalization of like recreational marijuana? And Senate Bill 20 in particular deals with a situation where you can be busted with 3 ounces or less of marijuana, and you ask almost any prosecutor in the state, under the law right now, they're not going to charge you. because at any point prior to trial, you can go get a medical marijuana card, submit it to the prosecutor or the court, and you're off the hook. So to me, that looks a little more like de facto legalization of recreational marijuana than a medicinal program. So that's why I supported the measure. The measure basically says you just have to have the card. It's kind of like having a prescription for a lot of other drugs. You could be busted with controlled substance if you don't have a prescription for a lot of drugs that you're carrying. This would be very consistent with other drugs. So for that reason, I was in support of Senate Bill 20.
Thank you. Well, and also, Representative Hansen, thank you for the segue to the next question. Senate Bill 3 is a recreational marijuana bill. And the question is regarding your position on whether to pass it or recommend the language for voting on it in the fall. So, essentially, your position on Senate Bill 3.
I'll take that.
Senator
Yeah.
Boland.
Well, thank you very much. I was one of the 17 people that voted against this in the Senate. It passed 18-17. I spent my whole life, my working life, as a teacher, most of the time in Canton. Tried to encourage students, young people, to stay away from drugs. I know this whole thing is just for adults, but I don't think that recreational marijuana is a good, positive thing for the state of South Dakota, so I'm not in favor of it. I voted against it. It passed by a narrow margin, and that's why I voted against it in the Senate. And the public in my area clearly knows my position on this issue. Thank you.
I did fail to mention that we are having some folks having difficulty hearing the people to my left. So I think Alex, if you can adjust that, or should they speak louder? Okay. Senator Sutton.
This bill passed the Senate 18-17. I did vote against this bill, just did not believe that this is the best for South Dakota.
Representative Pischke.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, I suspect that this just came over to the House. It's probably going to be sent to House State Affairs. My suspicion is that it's going to die in House State Affairs, so I probably won't get a vote on this. Personally, I would prefer that this measure be sent back to the people in a constitutional way to vote on recreational marijuana, just up or down, and then we can take it from there. I think, what the legislature is doing here is they're putting in the appropriate language that they would like to see if it was on the ballot and go from there. But like my personal preference, it would be sent back to the voters. I've always fallen more on the side of personal freedom and personal responsibility. And so, we can make these same arguments about alcohol and alcohol abuse. Maybe it's not the best thing for society, but you have the personal responsibility to do what you think is in the best for you. We've heard arguments about lottery and video lottery and that kind of sort of thing not being the best for society. Yeah, I can make that argument too, but again, it comes back to personal responsibility. If you don't like video lottery, don't play it. I don't play it. If you don't like cigarettes, don't smoke them. I don't smoke them. If you don't like marijuana, don't do it. I don't smoke marijuana. But for those people that want to have that personal responsibility, go ahead. And so that's where I am on the issue. I don't know if I would necessarily vote for Senate Bill 3 because it's taking it, just doing it outright. I'd rather see go back to the voters.
Thank you.
Sorry, I get a little excited sometimes.
Yeah, you're right. Representative Haugaard.
Thank you very much. This bill, like Representative Pischke indicated, probably won't make it to the House floor, and I'm not on the State Affairs Committee, but this is a 30-page bill. This is another rewrite of the initiative measure. Just like I mentioned on the previous Senate bill, that was striking through a lot of the initiative measure. And it was my understanding that the people who are advocating for those initiative measures believe that those were the most comprehensive plan for those programs. So, as I said, I think it's going to take several years to walk through this. The medical side of it, to me, I don't understand why that wasn't something that was solidified 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I mean, marijuana's been around forever, but the pharmaceutical companies never picked it up. So then it comes into this separate category. The medical side of it, I know a lot of people benefit from that, and that program needs to get well established. These other approaches, like I say, a 30-page bill, and the nuances contained with those, it needs to have actual review that can make sure these things are going to stand muster when they come to court.
Representative Hansen.
Well, thanks for the questions. So I am not going to support this bill. I am on state affairs, and I'm going to vote against the bill. You know, I'm just not convinced that legalizing recreational marijuana is going to be a good thing for families. I think it's going to have a lot of harmful impacts on families. And you know, there's a lot of industries, there's a lot of groups out that come out to Pier, and they all have their advocates. You know, the marijuana industry has its advocates. The NRA, the gun owners have their advocate. The list goes on and on and on. But there's not a lot of advocates for families. And so as the years go on, I just find myself becoming more and more of a, frankly, radical advocate for families. And in this case, I'm just not convinced that legalizing adult use recreational marijuana is going to be a good, healthy thing for families. I think it's going to have a lot of negative consequences. And for that reason, I'm opposed to it. If you're looking for an advocate to legalize recreational marijuana, I'm not your guy.
Thank you. Representative Jameson.
Not to say that I'm your guy either, as they say, but, so a couple realities here are true that were just stated by a couple of the speakers. This is just coming to the House, and it first has to go through state affairs. It will not survive the next phase. It will die. There'll probably only be a few supporters in that committee. And that's just part of the process. It has to go through both bodies, and sometimes it lives in one and dies in the other, and it's just the balance that we have. We recently had a bill in the House that we got to the floor that had a taxing structure, a trigger mechanism that would allow essentially Senate Bill 3 to take effect if the voters passed the initiated measure that's on the ballot. That was the only way it would take effect. And the taxing structure was a 15% tax and seemed a reasonable tax to have on an item like marijuana. And I think the real reality is the body doesn't really have an appetite to take on a measure or an item like recreational marijuana. Now, IM 26 passed with overwhelming numbers. That was a clear message. But this one, with Amendment A passing with 54%, was still a little questionable. So it's hard for us to get behind it or in front of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to move on to the topic of education. House Bill 1337. We've had multiple questions that have come in on this bill. So I'm trying to see if I can combine them into one there. So House Bill 1337 it makes, I'm just going to read the first one here. It makes educators fear teaching uncomfortable truths. Do you believe our students should learn the history of tragic events, or should we further whitewash our standards? And then the second question is there have been education bills dictating how teachers teach, what can be taught, who can be on teams. What is your position on local control in education? So I've kind of combined those, but we had multiple questions on the same bill, House Bill 1337. Senator Boland to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, I'm a retired government history teacher, spent most of my career in Canton. I'm going to be one of 7 individuals looking at this bill on Tuesday morning, 7:45 to 10 o'clock, evaluating it along with 1012. Haven't totally made up my mind yet. I think everybody, this bill from from my study of it or evaluation of it, this bill's been changed dramatically since it was first introduced. I believe there's going to be some amendments to it, and then it would have to go back to the House. But I don't. I'll just have to wait and see. I'll be thinking about it a lot the next couple days, on Monday as well. It's it has been dramatically changed since it was first introduced. It passed the House overwhelmingly, and I'll be one of 7 people making that decision as to whether we advance it to the floor. Thank you.
Representative Howgard.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very important question. It surrounds the idea of this critical race theory, and I don't think there's probably curriculum out there that's really focused on some of these things we, on the conservative side, might say we don't like. But really more to the point is that what are the teachers teaching? How are they nuancing their presentations? And that's for the school board to determine if they're going to keep those teachers on, if they're not doing a good job and that sort of thing. So yes, this is like so many of the issues we face out in Pierre. Well, you're on this side for local control on this bill, but you're on this side for something else. And that's just kind of a fact. In this case, the state constitution, Article 8, Section 1 says this: the stability of a republican form of government, depending upon the morality and intelligence of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislature to establish a standard and uniform system of education open to the public. So the idea there is standardization to a certain extent. It has to be uniform, and that's potentially what this kind of a bill is looking for. But really, it's up to the school boards to hire good teachers, make sure their curriculum is balanced, and that's where it should be. But again, the state does have a responsibility to see that things are standardized to a certain extent and uniform to ensure that we do have a stable republic, because you want to ensure that people are moral and intelligent.
Representative Hansen.
Thanks for the question. I think this is one of those bills where a lot gets sort of lost in the political firestorm public conversation. Because I think if you read the bill, what you'll find is that everybody knows our nation has scars. And it's okay to talk about that. We should talk about those things at appropriate ages. And I trust our local schools to bring those topics up at an age that's appropriate to these kids. But the bill itself that's run through the legislature, we voted on it in the House. I voted for it. It prevents curriculum and teaching on divisive concepts. And I would encourage you just to go read those concepts. So, for example, it prohibits the teaching that any race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior. I think we all agree on that. Shouldn't be teaching that. That individuals should be discriminated against or adversely treated on the basis of their race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. And it goes on and on. I think if you read the bill, you'll find that it's actually pretty agreeable. But it gets sort of lost in the public back and forth, in the political debate. But please, I just encourage you to read the bill. And I think if you read the bill, you'll see that you'll agree with a lot of it, if not all of it.
Senator Sutton.
This bill has not come to the Senate yet. Being in appropriations, many times we don't see a bill until it comes out of committee. We have over 600 bills this year. But in particular with this bill, I do agree with Representative Hansen that in many ways we all agree. There are some differences in ideology. But I think when we really sit down and talk about these issues, there are many issues we agree with. I just want to make this statement, is that I take a big responsibility that it is up to the community and parents to teach their children. We cannot just depend on the education system. It has to come from the parents, has to come from the household. And I do realize there's a lot of divided households out there where there's not a two-parent family, and it makes it very difficult. But I do believe that the start of this has to start with the family. Thank you.
Representative Jameson.
I just couldn't resist to finally have a moment where I could agree with my neighbor here and in principle, and it did pass through the House. I voted for it as well. You know, I served on the city council for 8 years, and some of those meetings were pretty hostile, pretty intense, pretty serious. And the legislature has those same topics and discussions, but school boards are now having those same discussions, and you can feel that tension. And you know, I like the local control and that is available with school boards, but this bill really does. And like Representative Hansen mentioned, read the bill. There's a lot of good language in here that just makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, God, I put the lid back on my water. We are going to stay on the education topic. This is going to be a question in regard to Senate Bill 139, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce this, but Senate Bill 139 would provide for Osceola-Sakowin community-based schools as a nonprofit corporation seeking sponsorship with the board of a local school district. Do you support Senate Bill 139? Senator Bolin.
Well, thanks again for that question. Again, this bill came through Senate Education. It passed out with 1 negative vote, went to the Senate floor where it was passed. I believe there were about 10 or 12 negative votes. So it passed about 25 to 10. What this bill does is it is going to allow 2, not 4 from the past, but 2 schools culturally developed for Native American students. We have heard this is the 3rd year in a row this bill has come to Senate Education. Passed out of one time it failed on the Senate floor, another time it failed in the House. But this is a bill that is going to allow for 2 schools culturally appropriate for Native Americans to try to see if we can benefit and increase educational outcomes for our Native American population. We have excellent schools in most places in South Dakota, but when you get to the reservation and you look and you see the results and the situation and the circumstances that confront students there, we cannot continue to go down the same road. Now, I know the educational establishment in the state was opposed to this bill because they think it opens it up for charter schools, but we do not have the luxury of allowing somewhere between 10 and 12% of the population of the state of South Dakota to continue to be involved in abysmal educational systems. Thank you. I'm excited about that one.
Representative Hogauer.
Thank you very much. When I became Speaker of the House, I put myself on the Tribal Relations Committee because I did want to see some improvements and some changes. This is a bill that developed over the past few years, and as Senator Bolin mentioned, it's made it quite a ways through the process in the past. Senator Heinert is the sponsor of the bill. Senator Heinert was raised by his grandmother, who was Lakota speaking. There's Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, and sometimes I get those confused, but I believe she was Lakota speaking. And anyway, he just sees the benefit in that. I think a lot of us see the benefit in reaching out and trying to bridge the gap that's developed between the part of the population and the population that's Native American background. And the fact is, every one of the 35 legislative districts in the state have a pretty significant Native American population, whether you're in Sioux Falls, Rapid, or on the tribal lands. So I think it's an important bill. I think we ought to move it forward and give a good opportunity for them to try this in the sense of a community-based school. I think it'll benefit the tribes, and I especially think it bridges that gap. It provides some healing. It's sort of like the Code Talker Memorial that I'm sponsoring. I hope we can get that through because I think that's another important step to recognize the contribution that the Native American tribal people have provided to the state of South Dakota.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thanks very much for the question. Well, this is new to the House, so I haven't really studied the language very carefully yet, but I love the concept, and I look forward to being able to support this bill. I've always thought that we need sort of an all-of-the-above education plan for the state of South Dakota. We need excellent public schools, and the legislature has a constitutional duty, as Representative Hogauer mentioned earlier, to provide for those. We need excellent non-public schools. We need excellent homeschooling opportunities for families. Because the reality is, for some kids, one option is just going to work better than the other option. And so what's most important, in my opinion, is that families and students have the freedom to decide what education option works best for their family and their young kid, their students. And so in this case, it looks like the concept here is to provide schools that are going to help enhance the local culture and provide hopefully for a better education for these students. And I think that's great. I'll be very happy and excited to support that bill.
Senator Sutton.
I did support this bill. It passed the Senate 22-13, and as Senator Boland had mentioned, this is a bill that has been in the works for several years, 2 to 3 years as I remember, and I believe this is a good start. We do need to make changes in the Native community, and I do believe this is a beginning of that. Thank you.
Representative Pischke and then Representative Jameson.
Thank you so much. Well, I don't know if I'm going to support this. Maybe I can be convinced during the debate, but you know, the idea of charter schools across the school is intriguing. I mean, so that's something that might sway me to a yes, but you know, I have a hard time saying that we need to give preferential treatment just to a certain population of our state. So we're going to do this thing just for the kids on the reservation, but we're not going to make special treatment for the kids over in Del Rapids or the kids in Millbank. So that's where I always come down, and sometimes I come down on no on some of these bills, because I just don't think it's fair. We're supposed to give an equal opportunity to education to all students across the state, not just, you know, based on the color of your skin.
Representative Jameson.
Yes, thank you. So, right, this hasn't come through the House yet, and I serve on tax and local government, so education issues haven't been really in front of me in committee at least. But just from hearing the discussion, the concept sounds well and good, and obviously I think all of us understand there's a problem on the reservations. We need to address it. We're the right body to address it, and the structure is here. So in general, I support it, but yet it still hasn't come through the House.
Right, thank you. We're going to move on to a couple of questions kind of related to some infrastructure. So starting with Senate Bill 55 on broadband, what's your position on more funds for broadband? Senator Boland.
Very quickly, yes, we want to get the entire state taken care of.
Representative Haggard.
Maybe not so quickly. I was on appropriations last year. There's a bill that came through for $75 million to fund private broadband. And as of about 2 months ago, they hadn't spent a dime of it, except for $200,000 in administration costs. So the money was sitting there. At the same time, we passed this through appropriations over my objection, but it passed through appropriations. There were at least 2 and maybe more federal programs that were available to do this. The part of the problem with this was, from my perspective, when we addressed it last year, with old data, it showed that 96.2%, I think it was, of all households in South Dakota already had a cable to their door. Now, they might want a fiber optic cable as opposed to a copper cable, but they still had a cable to their door. And that was old data, so I'm assuming now it's probably updated to more like 98%. But whatever the number is, the cable wasn't readily available. The entire world right now is trying to put broadband more accessible, which is fine, but there's that kind of demand all across the world, plus a lot of this cable is produced in China. And so then even if you get the cable, you've got to find the crews to get it in the ground. And I think you can see around the area here, there are crews working on that all the time. So I don't think there's a need to put more money into the pot right now. And in fact, if this money's allocated, do you think your cable price is going to go down?
Thank you. We are going to go to Representative Pischke and then to Senator Sutton.
Thank you. Well, very quickly, I echo the comments made by Representative Haggard, and then I just want you to ask yourself, is it the role of government to be providing a service that the private sector can provide? You know, we just heard from Representative Haggard that we allocated $75 million for this last year, and they've only used the administration cost, and now we're going to throw another $50 million at it? Yeah, I won't be supporting it.
Senator Sutton.
This bill passed the Senate 35-0, and I do support this bill. When you look at a bill, And this bill has a 50 million allocation to it. It's authority. It's not general funds. And there's a huge difference between giving authority in appropriations versus you have other funds and you have general funds. So when you look at a bill, look at that dollar amount and look what they're approving. In this particular bill, it is federal fund authority. And I did feel that it was the best decision. Thank you.
Representative Jameson.
Thank you. You know, broadband is seeming to become kind of a like a utility almost, in that it's almost felt like it should be expected, like electricity or water, and that a municipality or state should provide that to everybody. It's kind of in that blurred line. It isn't a utility, but it's becoming closer to that need based on our lives and how we live, and everything revolves around it and needs it and uses it. I supported the last funding measure to try to create broadband across the state, and I'll continue to support that. I think it's just becoming an evolution and a piece that we have to do. I think the public is, and our economic development opportunities are limited by the amount of broadband that's available. We've got all these people who moved to South Dakota from Colorado and all these heavy tax states, California, to find opportunity. They move out to the Black Hills, for instance, to find that little piece of heaven and work from home, only to find out that they don't have broadband or some access to it. So there's lots of examples, but I do support the bill.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you. Well, I do remember when we took this issue up last time for the $75 million, and one of the things that was said at the time was that if we spend this $75 million, it'll fund the rest of broadband for the entire state. And now we've got a bill where we're going to send $50 million more at the issue, and it just makes me wonder, what is this really going to? Could this $50 million, you know, there's so much money, I think we're probably going to get more into it, but there's so much more money that's just raining down from the federal government, irresponsibly so, in my opinion. And we've literally been told that the $75 million was going to fund the rest of broadband for the entire state. Why are we doing $50 more million? I don't really understand that. So I'm going to need a lot more information on this bill, but right now I'm going to be opposed to it.
Thank you. Our next question is around the CO2 pipeline, House Bill 1170. What's down on this? We've got a couple of questions in. One just saying what are the setbacks and depth, and then how are landowners to protect themselves. So the CO2 bill, House Bill 1170? Does that make sense? Or is it a resolution?
It must be a different bill.
Okay.
Not 1170.
Okay. All right.
What's the bill number?
He said 1170.
1170 is what they have. They have HR, which might be a resolution, but 1170 isn't the right number structure, is it? So I'll give them a minute to see if we can find that. Maybe while we're looking to see if that's out there, I'll move on to a different question and we can come back to that if we figure it out. So a couple of questions around the area of child welfare. So Senate bill, and again, I'm not sure about this because it's got 1110 and that's too many numbers for a Senate bill. And then later it talks about House Bill 1110. So it is, what is your position on requiring a special advocate for neglected and abused children? And what's the status of this bill and funds for CASA? Representative Hansen.
Thank you. I can take this one. This one came through Judiciary, and the first draft of this bill, I think it really would have had a really negative impact on our CASA program. And so we deferred action on the bill. This is a bill that was brought to us by the Chief Justice. We deferred action on the bill, and we're able to come up with an amendment so that the language now says that the court still shall appoint a special advocate if the advocate is available. The reality is, when we were looking at this bill, there's a lot of sort of deserts in the state of South Dakota where these advocates aren't available to these children. So that's almost raised a whole nother issue where, we need to come up with some ideas to find more volunteers so that kids who are abused or neglected have advocates who will come to court and help them, speak on their behalf. So it's raised a really important issue that I didn't know existed. I didn't know we had these sort of droughts when it came to special advocates across the state. So I think the bill is in better form now. Maybe if you saw the earlier draft, I would encourage you to go back and look at it because I think it's in okay form now. And then in the future, let's figure out ways to make sure that children who are in need have special advocates before the court.
Representative Haugard.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. It really was intended to address the fact, just as was mentioned, there was a shortage of special advocates. And there's a shortage of volunteers in all sorts of things, whether it's volunteer fire and rescue in all sorts of areas. But this is one area where these special advocates go through a good deal of training. And in an abuse and neglect case, you're going to have the court appoint attorneys to represent both the mother, the father, and the children, and sometimes multiple attorneys for the children. And the special advocate's role is to try to kind of parse through the information, review the reports, and understand exactly what's going on, and then provide some additional information to the court so they can make a better decision about the ultimate outcome. And this just was intended to say may as opposed to shall in one particular point because of that shortage of special advocates. And so the bill is okay the way it is right now. It says shall appoint special advocate if available and may appoint a guardian ad litem when determined necessary by the court. And that's just to say if I can't find a special advocate, I might, as the judge, I might appoint another attorney involved here as a guardian ad litem, a guardian at law, to assist in the litigation.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, so our next question in that child welfare category is in regard to child support. We've had multiple questions submitted on Senate Bill 7-8. Shouldn't the child support schedule be updated rather than to continue using a schedule based on 2016 prices and wages? And the other question was the same thing. Isn't it time to update this? Senate Bill 78. Representative Pischke.
Okay, I thought you were going to talk about 1278. Senate Bill 78?
That's what it has.
I'm pretty sure this is
House
1278.
Bill 1278.
Okay.
All right, House Bill 1278.
Yeah, and I can speak to that, Jeff. So there was a child support commission that met last year. It's actually mandated by the federal government, part of the Title IV Part D, that our child support guidelines or child support laws need to be reviewed every 4 years. That was supposed to happen in 2020. It did not happen because of COVID, and so it got delayed to 2021, and now they're bringing the bills this year. And the argument for updating the obligation table is that, inflation happens, everything's getting more expensive, it costs more to raise kids. I get that argument. If you look at the obligation table and how it actually works, though, inflation's going to increase people's wages as well. And so when your wages go up, you're automatically going to be in a new level in the schedule, and you're automatically going to be in a new amount for child support. So in my opinion, the obligation table really doesn't need to be adjusted hardly at all. But I made some concessions. I went to the prime sponsor, Representative Stevens, and we have decided that we're going to change the abatement statute in 1279 so that non-custodial parents that are active in their child's life and are actually playing a role and actually have costs of their own are going to be able to receive an abatement every month that they have their kids, as long as they have them, the standard schedule of Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, every other weekend. So that's going to be a big win for non-custodials in the state, and so that still allows for the obligations schedule to be updated as they wanted.
Anyone else? Representative Jameson.
Just to answer the question, yes, they should be adjusted.
All right. Not seeing anyone else, we're going to move on to, we've got some questions on the, basically around sentencing, I guess. So Senate Bill 159 is about exempting people who are mentally ill from capital punishment. Do we want to be a state that executes severely mentally ill people? Senate Bill 159. Senator Boland, am I seeing you?
Yeah. That bill came Came before the Senate. Probably one of the tougher votes I've taken this year. I believe I voted no on that bill. I think it passed, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of questions, sometimes when I just want to use this as an illustration, when you vote, it's 100% one way or 100% the other way. There's no in between. But I want to also tell you that the thought process that you go through, at least I go through oftentimes in making a decision, is oftentimes very conflicted. There were a lot of testimony, a lot of debate on both sides of the issue. It's what I call a 51-49 vote. In the end, I voted no on the bill, but I can clearly see the very solid arguments on the other side. So I'll just use that as an illustration of oftentimes how oftentimes on that bill, I'll just say I agonized on my vote before I cast it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Senator Sutton.
This bill did pass the Senate floor 21-14, and I did speak against this bill on the Senate floor. And it was a very debatable bill. It was a very difficult bill. It's an emotional bill. It tugs at your heart. This bill was one of the most difficult bills that we've had to make a decision on. And the reason I did not support this bill is that this actually hits only a very small part of our population. And there is help out there for individuals who are mentally ill. They're getting it. So if you have an individual that goes to this extent, there's something seriously wrong. So that was the big reason why I voted against it, because there is help in the state of South Dakota for the mentally ill to get help.
Representative Haugard.
Yes, thank you. I hadn't reviewed the bill this year until just now, and I can see that there's some nuances to it that need attention, but obviously the direct answer to the question is, should we be executing someone who's severely mentally ill? The answer is no. The provisions in this have a variety of things. They're including revisions to a jury verdict, for example, of guilty but mentally ill, or number 2, not guilty by reason of insanity, or number 3, guilty but severely mentally ill. So all those have accompanying definitions, and so those are things we'd need to wade through. But I've spent a fair amount of time at the penitentiary over the years, and been in the room where they do the executions, and that's a pretty weighty issue for anybody that's involved in that process that has to carry out those executions. And the fact is, we've done kind of a poor job over the years in funding, whether it's probation or parole. We don't pour enough time and energy into those, and money into those areas. And this is one area where if someone's mentally ill and they're being housed at the penitentiary, they need the services there as well. But the direct answer to the question is no, we should not be executing someone who's severely mentally ill.
Representative Hansen.
Thanks for the question. I'm going to support this bill, and it's going to come before a committee, and so we'll have time to work out any issues in the drafting. I haven't really studied it thoroughly, so it might be subject to some amendments. But I do support the concept. I don't think we should be putting to death people who are mentally ill at the time of the commission of their offense. And I wonder if you've ever known somebody who has had like a manic bipolar episode. I have. And it's almost like a different person. So should they be held, there needs to be culpability if there's a criminal offense that occurs. But I hope you never have to experience that. But if you do, I think you'll understand why this bill makes sense.
Representative Pischke.
Thank you. Just to answer the question, I agree with Representative Hansen that no, we shouldn't be executing them. Just on a broader discussion, we as a legislature, a lot of Republicans always cast ourselves as, we're very pro-life. And to me, that doesn't necessarily mean just pro-birth. It means that we need to give respect to people at the end of their life as well. And so that's why I've really had some struggles at sometimes with the death penalty as a whole. And so, I go down. I'm gonna be in committee with Representative Hansen as well on this bill. It'll be coming up this week, and I'm gonna give it its due thought and due diligence. But I'll probably be supporting it. I mean, I'm gonna listen to the arguments, but sometimes I have a hard time with the death penalty, just as we have it in South Dakota. And I understand the reasons for it. It's the stick, and it gets people to plead to certain things. But I'm gonna give it its due diligence, and I hope I answered your question.
Representative Jameson.
Yeah, just to answer the question, yes, I can see myself supporting it. Just this is the first time I've read it or seen it and heard the discussions and people talking about it. There does need to be a compassion level there that's different than and other people who have committed the same crime. Anyway, just based on what I see so far, I can support it.
So kind of staying on that line with sentencing, Senate Bill 172, parole for lifers is what's listed as the subject. Can you consider that rehab is possible even after a terrible crime? Senate Bill 172. Senator Bolin?
Yeah, on this bill, I voted yes. And again, that just shows and I had conflicting thoughts on this one, but in this case, when the bill came, I thought this was a bill that, after weighing it carefully, that I would support. So I voted yes on this bill.
I'll speak to this too.
Rep. Pischke?
Thank you. It falls into the same category too. So I spoke to the reasons as to why to support the bill. I'm just going to give the counter argument here. So let's say that you're the parent of a child that was brutally murdered, and now we're going to give that person the ability to get out after 25 years. Just have that thought go through your head. So, because that's the kind of thoughts that were going through our heads when we consider this kind of legislation. So it's going to be a hard vote this week on these two bills, but I think that I'm giving it its consideration. So,
Senator Sutton.
This bill passed the Senate 18-17, and I did vote against this bill. And so I just want to mention that we have 35 senators and 70 House of Representatives, and we all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and so sometimes those experiences do have a reflection on who we are. But we try really hard to bring the facts together and try to make the best decision, not only for our district, but for the state of South Dakota. And I just want to share a really quick story. I worked with a young lady, and she had a neighbor, and the neighbor got on drugs, went and killed 3 of her children, beat them to death. Now that had a very big impact on my life because she was one of my employees. She was a clerk that I had for several years. So I knew her personally. I saw the devastation. Only one child lived. She had 4 children, and he went under the bed. And that's why he survived. And he's never been normal because of that experience. He was about 9. And so when these bills come up, it does hit an emotional hot point. And sometimes it is very, very difficult to try to make the right decision. So I try to be very respectful in everybody's decision. Thank you.
Representative Halgard?
Yes, thank you very much. Over the years, when I started law practice in 1983, there were about 500 inmates in the penitentiary. Now there's 7 times as many inmates in the penitentiary. We need to have comprehensive criminal justice reform. This is one of those areas to consider, but also in those early years of my practice, I was appointed to represent a lot of people to review their cases, one of which was a person that ended up serving more time in prison than anybody else in the United States. And he had been up at the penitentiary here since he was 17. He'd been involved in murdering someone. And he ended up being so institutionalized that there wasn't anything left of him toward the end of his life. He was just always bumming cigarettes, and that's about the extent of what he did. And so this bill is intended to kind of recognize the changes, but at the same time, you've got to balance that against, are there ultimate consequences for actions? And if there is no death penalty, that a lot of people would advocate we should do away with. If there is no life in prison, a lot of people advocate for that, then is there a true deterrent anymore? And it's just a discussion point to be had. There's a model of imprisonment in Norway that I think is worth taking a close look at. They do not have anyone who's sentenced to life in prison. They review those sentences after a period of time, and even a murder case, they will review those. And so there are better models of imprisonment around the world. We should take a look at that, and this is probably one of those areas to consider. But you need to have ultimate consequences at some point along the way. Otherwise, the society always figures they'll just get another chance. It's just a point of discussion.
Representative Hansen.
Yeah, this one, I don't quite know where I'm going to come down on this one yet. I think I'm going to vote no on it, though, but I'm open to my mind being changed. I mean, really what this fundamentally comes down to is, when do we start treating people like adults? Because it's not really a question of life imprisonment. I mean, life imprisonment is going to be on our books whether or not this bill passes. The question is, at what age are you eligible for life imprisonment? And under this bill, you could have, a college graduate who's been out in the workforce for a couple of years. I think we would consider that person an adult. And if they go murder your loved ones in cold blood, first-degree murder, perhaps justice demands, in that case, life imprisonment. I can think of situations where justice would possibly demand life imprisonment. Doesn't mean they're going to get it. They're going to have to go through a jury trial, and a judge ultimately is going to sentence them. And the judges exercise their discretion in those cases. It's the most, I would almost never want to be a judge, just because I can't imagine what it's like to sentence people in that regard. Even just in a year in prison, 3 years in prison, imagine what that's like. But it's a very difficult decision, and they take it very seriously. So I think there are cases where justice perhaps demands life imprisonment for these people. I think they're adults at that point, and so that's why I'm probably leaning against this bill.
Thank you. Representative Jameson.
Yeah, this is a pretty serious topic, and this is the first I've heard of it and or seen it. And, I'm on tax and local government, so this is a lot of my wheelhouse. But I was just sitting here thinking about it, just listening to discussions, and where was I when I was 25 years old? Where were my kids when they were 25 years old? Just, mentally, and I don't have an extensive experience in the penitentiary or with inmates or in a court. So just trying to think of it, and with all the other things we have at the age of 21, that you are now responsible, and there's no turning back. There's so many rules that revolve around the age of 21. That year has been decided as the day. So just initial glance at this and understanding of it, I would have trouble supporting it.
All right, thank you. We're going to do one more question kind of around the defense system, and then just to give you guys a heads up, we got a lot of questions on money, so that'll be the next topic. So this is in regard to Senate Bill 195, a stand your ground law. So Senate Bill 195 requires the prosecution to prove that a defendant accused of assault or murder did not have legitimate claim to self-defense. Isn't that the job of the defense? Is the question written, or you could just speak to your position on Senate Bill 195?
I'll take that. This is
Representative Hansen.
I'm the prime sponsor of this bill on the House side. This is sort of an amendment to a law that was passed recently on Stand Your Ground, and this really comes for a couple reasons. Number one, when the law was passed, a provision like this was included, and then it got amended out, and we passed it. And then I know there's at least one judge, maybe a few others, who have said, well, who's got the burden of proof? It's not in the bill. So there's a lot of confusion surrounding that. I've heard criticism about the law that we passed on that question. And so, when it comes to really any criminal case, the burden is on the government to prove your guilt. And so this is just consistent with that, in my opinion. It's saying if you've got a situation that's covered by the old bill, you know, in a stand your ground situation, if a prima facie claim of self-defense immunity has been raised by the defendant, the burden of proof is on the government. And I just think that makes sense in the criminal context that it's structured that way.
Senator Sutton?
This bill passed the Senate 28-7, and I did support this bill.
Representative Howard?
Yes, likewise. It is just a clarification of what I think the Supreme Court decision would ultimately decide. That it should be the understanding that if the prosecution is going to prove their case, they need to prove this element of the case as well.
And I also
Senator Bowman?
supported this bill. Agree with Representative Howgard here.
All right, so we're going to move on to some questions around money. We're going to start on the revenue side, so taxes. Couple of questions relative to Senate Bill 166, which is, it says nixing the half-penny tax. So I'll give you both questions that are here. First one is the reason for not supporting this tax a reflection of a lack of teacher support, or is there another reason? And then when will the legislature start to compensate shoppers for the higher tax we've been paying on food for 18 years? So Senate Bill 166, which, okay, I got Representative Jameson first. Howgard will be second.
So I haven't opened the bill yet. I'm just making my comments based on what I just heard and the idea of removing the tax on food, correct? And the concept or proposal has been made before, and one of the concerns is that if you eliminate one of the items that is purchased by all individuals and continuously, generally, regardless of their income, they're going to be purchasing food, those individuals become a participant in the structure of government. They are funding it. They are all helping it. They are not exempt. Nobody's exempt, essentially. That is the one stable, always there funding source. If we remove that, it will tremendously weaken the ability of the state to provide services to everybody in all fashions. So this concept was discussed in the city level as well. And it was always seen as just a risky place to eliminate tax. Even though we'd all like to help those individuals who can't afford to even buy groceries, it's their one way of always continuously participating in government in some way, and it's too hard for government to absorb that cost.
Okay. Representative Howgard?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This one specifically, excuse me, this specifically focuses on food as opposed to the more general bill that we've brought in the House, which was intended to focus on the promise that was made, the statutory obligation that we had to reduce the 4.5% sales tax down to a 4% sales tax. But again, this is just a reflection of the fact that we've ignored our responsibilities in regard to raising revenue for decades. There needs to be a comprehensive discussion about taxes. I've been advocating for this, that there needs to be a tax conference, essentially. We've got real estate taxes that are killing farmers and ranchers. We've got real estate taxes that make elderly people in their home wonder if they can hang on to their home anymore. You've got this food tax, which truly is a regressive tax, that needs attention. So I'm not sure this is the answer. As I say, I'd like to have a comprehensive review of all of it, but this would be a step in the direction of at least giving some relief to individuals who, everybody's going to buy food, everybody's going to have these needs. I think the bill, I'm just scanning through it, I think it has some focus on clarifying which types of food would be taxed yet. Some states will ensure that things like meat, bread, milk, those are not taxed, but they'll still allow a tax on cookies and chips and other things like that. So we need a broader look.
Representative Pischke and then Representative Hansen.
Thank you for the question. Well, I agree with a lot of the comments that Representative Howgard made. I do think that we need a comprehensive review of our tax structure. And like you said, there's a lot of people that are, the property taxes are really hurting them, and there are people who are getting taxed out of their home and property taxes. But in regards to the food tax, this is something that I've supported in the past. Anytime that we can have less money going to the government and more money staying in the pocketbooks of you people, I view that as a good thing. Now, there's arguments to be made that we should do it on all across the board, and that's what House Bill 1327 did, and I supported that. But we need to have the conversation. We can't obviously remove all taxes because there are some government services that are essential. So this is an idea that I would support, but like I said, we can't do everything. So.
Right. Representative Hansen?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. My first preference would be to lower the sales tax rate from 4.5% to 4%, and I supported that bill in the House. There's a lot of conversation when we took that bill up on the floor about, what might be coming down the road, inflation and rising costs of inputs and war in Europe and all the rest of it. And as I listened to that, I thought, well, isn't that all the more reason to put more money into the people's pockets rather than gobbling it up by the state, which is what we're doing right now. The state is just fat with cash. It's like Scrooge McDuck swimming around in this pit of money. And so when we've got that extra money, my first inclination is to say, let's get this back to the people. Now, that doesn't mean we can't just ignore the future. The state has always been very responsible about budgeting, not just for now, but the future. And so we have to be mindful about what's ahead. But right now, we could afford to give you your money back, and I think we should do that. Now, if the 4.5% to 4% issue goes away, and this was a compromise, that'd be great. I'm for this too. I think we should eliminate the sales tax on food. Whatever puts more money into your pocket, I'm going to support. And so, if not the overall sales tax rate, I would definitely support repealing the sales tax on food.
Senator Sutton?
This bill has not come to the Senate floor yet. I've heard some minor discussion on it. I am going to really have to look hard at this one. Realize that South Dakota is a small state. We get quite a bit of revenue from sales tax, which this would impact. So I would really want to look into the future, if I could, and see and question what are the unintended consequences.
I'll talk.
All right.
Really it comes down to this, folks. There's 7 states in this country that don't have a state income tax. Right now, the state of South Dakota does have a lot of money coming from the federal government, and we do have a lot of ongoing revenue as well. I'm not sure that's going to continue. And if the people, and I think I've voted on it twice in my lifetime, people of South Dakota do not want a state income tax. And if you're not going to have a state income tax, there are some essential government services that need to be funded, and that has to come from a sales tax, which is very broad-based. And that's where I'm standing on this issue. I'd rather just keep things as they are. Thank you.
All right. One more tax question. Senate Bill 59, tax levels and state aid to education. What is your position on Senate Bill 59? Senator Boland.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what's in Senate 59, but I will say this. I am in favor of the 6% increase that the governor proposed. We need to continue to support schools and educators as much as we possibly can. I am very worried about the inflationary pressures for the future. I think we'll be able to make that 6% this year. But as I look to the future, there are a lot of storm clouds out there. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Representative Hansen?
I'm going to support the 6% increase to teachers, to schools, I guess. And, we can do that, by the way, and still reduce the sales tax. So we can fulfill our obligation under the funding formula and beyond, and still reduce your sales tax burden. So I think that's a win-win, and we should do that. This particular bill, this is the bill where if the state adjusts the state share of the per student allocation, the property tax levies have to be adjusted as well. So that's what's happening in this bill. But that sort of brings up a word of caution, and it's to Representative Haugard's point that he was making earlier, which is that these property taxes are getting really outrageous. They just keep going up and up and up, and that is a hardship on many families across the state. And so we need to be looking at that because I think I'm concerned that people start begging for an income tax if their property taxes keep going up and up and up. And so we need to make sure that we have enough to fund the essential services of government. And I prefer a more broad-based system of taxation. But we do have to be mindful that these property taxes particularly don't continue to go outrageously high, because I think they're starting to reach that point.
Representative Howard.
Thank you very much. This is an annual bill that comes up as a revision of the tax formula, so it just adjusts small amounts and the percentages and the numbers. So that's what this is about. But the point of funding education, that's a state obligation. Just as I mentioned, Article 8, Section 1, and Article 8 generally is all about state education, including funding. And we have to do that. But we also have to do it wisely. There are some districts that probably spend too much money on administration costs, and that needs to be reviewed. But a quick lesson on the budget. Our budget is $5 billion. We only generate $2 billion of that. The other $3 billion is federal money every year. And we need to figure out a plan where we don't have to revisit these things every year over and over again. There should be a long-range plan here as opposed to what we have, where we every year try to find enough money to sweep out of some secret fund to balance our budget. And again, going back to the real estate tax issue, I did a closing for a friend not too long ago here in Sioux Falls. He's got $1 million house, nice house. But his monthly real estate tax is $1,500. You go out west, the ranchers that I talk to, they figure $240 per head just for real estate tax, because they've got 30 to 40 acres per head. So they're being just destroyed with that. We need to do something better, comprehensive plan, and again, this is just an annual bill, so there's not much here, but it's supporting education.
I
Senator
will
Sutton.
support the 6%, and as Representative Halgard mentioned, this does come to us every year.
Okay. Well, the next question is about the overall increase for education, but part of the question reads that the outlook for our state is better now than when Governor Noem delivered her budget address in December. So since most of you have spoken to the basic 6%, would you support an increase beyond 6%? Takers?
I'll take them.
Senator
I would
Bowen.
not at the present time. I don't think that would be, to quote George H.W. Bush, very prudent. That would not be wise as we look, because every year you're going to have to keep building on top of that base. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to Representative Pischke and then to Representative Halgard.
Thank you for the question. I'd actually entertain the idea of it. I mean, I'm not on appropriations, but I think that we do need to look at the idea. I mean, I get the argument that you got to build on it, but I mean, basically, the 6% has been what's been proposed, and I have not heard any conversations about deviating from that. So, from my understanding, it's going to be 6% for the big three: education, community support providers, and state employees. So, I think it's a conversation worth having. I just don't think it's happening. So.
Great. Representative Halgard, then Representative Hansen.
Thank you for the question. Some of the realities we should be aware of: South Dakota received more money per capita than any other state in the nation last year, more federal money per capita than any other state in the nation. The average state in the nation received 5 times as much federal money as a normal year. 5 times as much. We received 8.3 times as much as a normal year. We are flooded with billions of dollars that we would normally not receive. And when you talk about this increase, the 6% makes sense because that's probably the low end of what inflation was this year. But there are also other disparities that I've recognized anyway over the past few years. You know, our Chief Justice last year, he was making $148,000. $148,000. The university professors at SDSU and USD, not $148,000, $391,000. Now that's in the regental system, but $250,000 more. you gotta look at this budget as a whole, and you can't just constantly focus on one. You know, like I say, I expect 6% for everybody across the board this year. There needs to be a comprehensive review. Legislature and the governors have been sitting on their hands for 40 years not addressing these issues, and it needs to be done.
Representative Hansen.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I'm going to support the 6%. I don't support going beyond it at this point. You know, the statutory funding formula in the state is an increase of 3% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. And so we're already going well beyond that, and I support it. I think we should keep it as is. I do have concern about if you increase it, that gets built into the base, and then ongoing, you know, that's an obligation that you're going to have to satisfy. I think right now we should keep it as is. I'm not going to be supportive of increasing it beyond that at this point.
Representative Jameson.
Thank you. As I understand it, you know, generally nearly half of our budget is spent on education, and it's a great investment. And I do support the 6%. There are others who have mentioned a bigger percentage because of the challenges we're having with teachers and teacher pay. It's a serious discussion. If we were to maybe get past that and maybe ask for more money, what I would require is a bigger discussion about consolidation. There are multiple school districts in the city of Sioux Falls and duplicated services amongst superintendents and things like that. There's got to be a better way to go forward. I don't want our teachers to be last on the list, even though we spend half of our state budget funding it. There's got to be a better way. You know, some were talking about teachers and professors, the disparity, but judges. The idea is there's a duplication of services, and in government, we should be trying to consolidate that, eliminate duplications, and save money for the taxpayers, do better. So if we have a serious conversation about consolidation, I'll talk about increasing their wages even more.
Senator Sutton.
You know, the next 2 weeks are the critical part of the legislature. That's where we all come together, and the House has their priorities, the Senate has their priorities, and we come together to decide what the budget is, what we're going to support and what we're not. Now, when it comes to the education area, there's 3 areas. It's the educators, it's the community support providers, and it's the state employees. Last year, what occurred was that we gave an increase to the community support providers. Some of those providers did not get the increase that they should have had. So now we're going to go back, and there's going to be legislation coming to correct that. So, you know, when you say 6%, it's not all equal. And it depends on your local school district as well. So it gets a little messy and gets a little confusing. But yes, I'm supporting the 6%. We're going to look at getting it higher, but we really have to look at what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So this is the critical part of the legislative getting a balanced budget.
All right, so we've heard lots of talk of the wads of cash that the state has in hand, and there are lots and lots of bills that have been introduced about how to spend that pot of money, especially the one-time aspect of it. So we've had 2 specific questions come in. One is workforce housing, Senate Bill 65. Do you think Senate Bill 65 will help? The other is Senate Bill 175, shooting range. Is it fair to appropriate $2.5 million for a shooting range that would be used by a small minority of South Dakotans? I'm going to ask that those who respond, if there are other of the big kind of capital spending type bills of that one-time money, you might want to address those. We will move to closing comments after that, after this round. So this will be the last of the questions. So Senate Bill 65, Senate Bill 175, and kind of the big pot of money. Who wants to start? Representative Hansen.
Thanks for the question. I have some pretty significant concerns about this workforce housing big funding program. It seems like whenever there's a crisis, there's always this inclination that the government has to come in and throw a bunch of money at it to fix the problem. And I don't think you can do that in this case. I think it's generally speaking, a bad idea, but especially in this case, you know, we had a bill that came to the floor that just provided one of the mechanisms. And I asked on the floor, hey, if we do this bill and we fund it with a bunch of money, how much will the average price of a house go down? We couldn't answer that question. How much will the average rent go down for somebody? Couldn't answer that question. I think you can throw millions and millions and millions of dollars at this, and you might line the pockets of some big developers, but I don't think you're going to lower the average price of a house by much, if anything. And so I've got some just concerns specifically, but also just generally speaking when it comes to government injection into the free market with big pots of money. And is that really what we're going to do as a state? Is that what we're going to become as a state? It's just you know, funding these pet projects, and I hesitate to do that. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to be opposed to the workforce housing bill this year.
So we'll go to Representative Haugard and then Representative Pischke.
Thank you very much. Two questions, one about the shooting range out in Rapid City area, the other was about workforce housing. The shooting range, that's not my job. There's an individual out there that had a fairly comprehensive plan to actually put together a facility to manufacture ammunition and have a shooting range. And that didn't get accomplished, but the state somehow took the idea of the shooting range and ran with it. I don't support that. That's private sector business. Workforce housing, likewise. Yesterday I spent a fair amount of time staying there visiting with a variety of people from across the state about workforce housing, and they had displays of their projects and how they wanted to put together some certain lots in this one small community. And ultimately, when we were talking about workforce housing, we were talking about subsidizing the developer. The developer already had 34 lots laid out, and we were talking about, okay, what kind of housing you're going to end up with there. And the housing was going to be, well, maybe 200,000, maybe 300,000. I don't see that as workforce housing. I think that's just new homes and developers getting an opportunity to get their fingers in the cookie jar, and that's not what we should be doing. Workforce housing, to me, I'm kind of an old guy. I think of trailer houses, and I think of making do with what you've got. And so workforce housing is a little different subject for me.
Representative Pischke.
Thank you. Well, I echo a lot of the comments that Representative Hansen made on the workforce housing bill. You know, we're throwing a ton of money at this. That's what we're being proposed here. And I'm just not comfortable with the government picking winners and losers in the workforce housing area. I mean, and that's what's going to happen here. We're going to be giving a ton of money to the big players, and while your neighbor down the street who builds houses isn't going to be able to get any supplies. That's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That's not going to help anything out. That's going to create a shortage, and we have all these supply chain issues already, and now all the big players are going to have all the money. Prices are going to go up. The small players aren't going to be able to get any supplies, and they're not going to be able to build any houses. So in the end, we're just going to have a clog in the supply chain again. That's how government's going to fix this issue. In regards to the shooting range out there, I had a extensive conversation with the Secretary of GF&P yesterday, and I brought up some concerns about, there was a concern that Representative Haugard brought up, but somebody already had a plan in the private sector to do this, and now we want the government to come in and get involved in this. And I've heard rumors that the person that we get the contracting bid for that is actually a large donor of the governor. And so that doesn't sit well with me at all. And so it's, again, the government picking winners and losers based on who the government likes. And so I have some real hesitation when it comes to that.
Representative Pischke.
You're welcome.
Representative Jameson.
Nothing like getting cut off from the moderator. I hate that.
Sorry, it's my job.
So I don't know much about the gun range out in Rapid. I'll be interested to learn more about it, I suppose, if it gets to us. But on the point of workforce housing, I just wanted to kind of maybe clarify the gap that's missing today in South Dakota and Sioux Falls for sure. So a subsidized housing event is when somebody is making a wage that is such below the median income that the state feels obligated and has a fund to help support those individuals, or the federal government. And then you have the market rate of apartments or houses where the public, the supply and demand dictate that price, so that apartments, or all those apartments out there, are available for rent, and the owners are going to get as much as they can. What workforce housing here is attempting to address is the gap between those individuals who are maybe working at McDonald's or Walmart, or maybe even an electrician. I don't know, but somebody who is earning an income that is above a percentage of the median income, but not below the poverty level. It's that gap of individuals who are trying to earn a wage that still allows them to have a place to live. That's what this money is going to address. It's the number one problem we have in Sioux Falls. It's the number one problem that we need to address, and I'd like an attempt to address it, so I support it.
Phew, right under the interruption.
It looks like I'm the last one to speak on this one. As mentioned, there are 3 specific areas that Minnehaha and Sioux Falls is addressing this year. And it's workforce housing, it's child care, and it's the workforce. I did support both of these bills. On the workforce housing, we have to start somewhere. Is it a perfect bill? Absolutely not. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start addressing the challenges that we have here in Minnehaha. In regards to the shooting range, if you haven't heard the debate on that, I urge everyone to go and hear it. And the reason that I voted for it, I am a gun owner. I do know how to shoot. My family's passionate about it. And this is the reason I voted for it, is because there are kids out there that are not athletes. They're not in band. And I heard from parents that said, we need to do something with these kids, because you who have children know that if you have a 15 and 14-year-old and they're sitting at home, they could get into trouble. So I did this for the kids.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Senator Boland.
I'm gonna be brief. I will say we also are there's a bill out there for $600 million for for water projects across the state of South Dakota. I favor that. Workforce housing, I agree with Senator Sutton. I think it's not a perfect bill, but it's a bill that we need to push forward to try to do something to deal with the housing situation. And I also support the use of the money for the gun range out by Rapid City. I think it's a worthy project. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, we are moving to closing statements. We will start on my far right. Each legislator, again, will have 90 seconds to address issues that are out there, or make any other comments that they wish. So we'll start with Representative Pischke.
Well, we've had a lively discussion. Thank you so much for being here. I'll stay around later if you want to come up and introduce yourself, have a conversation. And so I don't really have too many more bills going through the process. I do have a bill for the Palisade State Park funding. I'm asking for a measly, like $500,000. Not like $150 million for some other things. So I just want to thank you guys for coming out and being part of the process and getting to know your legislators. It's a good thing for you guys to be involved.
Representative Jameson.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is a little bit like getting called on the carpet, which is a different process for us. In Pierre, we're a little isolated from the constituents, really. But there's some that might show up in the gallery, I think they even call it. And so there's a distance between us and the public when we make our votes. Answering questions directly from you is a bit of a challenge and puts us on the carpet. It makes us better because we have to answer. So I appreciate that. Are there any individuals here from District 12? If you are, and you're willing and wanting to stick around, I'll stay around and we can visit more. I appreciate you guys being here. I've enjoyed my time in the legislature. It's a tremendous privilege. It is. It's just amazing. If any of you have a chance to ever run, you should. I hope you do. I encourage you. I've just got a couple bills that I'm working on through the year. We're going to try to revise some of the rules regarding when liquor licenses can be sent out to the public. Instead of waiting every 10 years, they'll come out every year as the census estimates come out. I think that's a good bill. We're also working on some funding to create some quiet zones in the city of Sioux Falls and anywhere else in the state where trains come across roads, that we could allow some boarders to come down and they could stop blowing their whistles as much. It's a great opportunity for economic development. Thank you.
Representative Hanson.
Well, thanks so much for coming out this morning. It really is good that we gather together and do these things. So I appreciate that everybody comes out. And feel free to reach out into the future. I mean, one of the regrets that I have every year is that I'm not able to respond to every email and every phone call that I get. And I wish that I could. But we literally just get hundreds and hundreds of communications every day. So please know if you've been reaching out, most of us read all of our emails. I mean, I read every email that I get. I can't always respond to all of them, but please do know that many of your members, if you're emailing them, they are getting them and they are reading them. So your feedback is most welcome, and please do feel free to reach out at any time. Hopefully we can connect and talk about the issue that's important to you, and if not, at least let your voice be heard by shooting us an email or a text or a phone call, leave a voicemail or whatever. So I'll stick around for a little while. So it's great. It's great being here this morning, and appreciate you coming out.
Great. Senator Sutton.
Well, thank you all for coming today. I appreciate that you took the time to come and listen and to be an active part of this. I will give you a little part of what my day is like. Many days I start at 7 o'clock in the morning, go into the appropriations room, and there are many days we don't get out to noon, and then we go into caucus from noon to 1, and then we're on the floor, and from 1 to 3, sometimes 1 to 5, and then we have socials in the evening. Then I go back to my room and I study for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and try to sleep 5 to 6 hours and start all over again. So, I do, again, as Representative Hanson mentioned, we do get a ton of emails, and this is a year that we have just been inundated in appropriations. We have just been jam-packed, so I have not gotten to as many emails as I'd like to. The other thing that I want to mention is that, at the end of the day, one of the things that they tell us as a legislature is not to marry your bills. And so sometimes your bills pass and sometimes they don't. But at the end of the day, we all end up going to dinner together and respecting each other. I do have a bill to expand the Carroll Institute that's going to come up next week, and I'm going to try to push that through.
Representative Haggard.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming today, and likewise, I'll stick around for any questions you might have. We don't operate in a vacuum. And as I mentioned before, South Dakota received 8.3 times as much federal money as a normal year. We were flooded with money, so no wonder our economy looks a little better. Plus, you've got inflation, so therefore you're going to have inflated tax revenues. Again, we need comprehensive review in so many different areas, and it's just been neglected for so long, whether it's education, healthcare, social services, corrections, whatever it is. There needs to be a bigger view of what's going on, and we can't operate in a vacuum. We are $30 trillion in debt. And you can see what weakness does across the world. China is positioning themselves in a place where we don't want to see them. And so those are bigger discussions we should be having, and longer range planning to go along with it. Discussions about corrections, talking about spending like $600 million on a prison revision up here, instead of having a discussion about regional prisons and jails. It just doesn't happen. So many things are done piecemeal. Needs to change, and I hope I can be part of that change. So be glad to answer any questions you might have, and thanks for being here today.
Senator Boland.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to come up from Canton to answer some of the questions here. I've always enjoyed doing this. One thing I will say, I think that I'm going to be carrying a bill on Monday on the Senate floor. It's House Bill 1300. I think it's really an important bill. I wasn't the originator of it. I'm helping Representative Mortensen, who is the originator of it. It's a bill that will change the dates for both school board and municipal elections. I think it's an extremely important bill, and you'll probably want to hear about that. If we are able to get 18 votes in the Senate, that it has some lead time, but it would make some changes in the future as to when you would be voting for school board members and your city council and mayor as well. But again, thanks for the opportunity. I really kind of doubt if anybody's here from District 16, but it's a pleasure to try to answer questions. Thank you.
Well, a special thanks to our major sponsor, which is the AARP, other sponsors, Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce, League of Women Voters, and our Sioux Falls Education Association. In addition, a great shout out to Southeast Technical College for allowing us the use of this auditorium, and for our interpreter today, Rick Norris of Interprecorps. And thank you to the volunteers that have been here helping. Especially thank you to these legislators that have given up even more time out of their personal lives to come and be here. Great participation today. We had a lot of questions where everybody spoke, and we don't always have that happen. We ran a little long because I wanted to get through as many questions as I could, so my apologies for that. Again, this is our final legislative coffee of this year, so let's give these great folks a round of applause for their service. I think everyone has offered to stay around a little bit to answer additional questions. I just remind everyone the mics might be live for a little while they get things shut down. So thank you.